Hello everybody and a very warm welcome to Hockenheim for the second event of the 2019 International GT Open season. We are for the first time ever racing at the home of the German Grand Prix and we should be in for a thrilling weekend of racing. First up it is the 70-minute race and this is the third race of the season. So it's a very warm welcome from myself, Ben Evans, to a warm, sometimes sunny, sometimes quite overcast afternoon here in Germany as the pit lane is open and the cars heading to the grid where they will meet Podium from Michelin before going racing. A couple of new faces on the grid this weekend and the Get Speed Performance Mercedes of Janine Hill and John Schaffner amongst them. They will line up in 23rd position and our understanding is the grid being reduced to 23 cars after an incident brought out the red flag in qualifying this morning with Fabio Bonidi. It appears the Team Lazarus squad unable to get the car repaired in time as we ride in car with Michael Grenier, who will line up in 7th place in the Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini. It's the Emil Frey Racing squad who had the success in Paul Ricard, of course, last time out with Albert Costa and Giacomo Toe winning race 1, and that is the car we watch now. And then the second car of Norbert Siedler and Michael Grenier victorious in race 2. So will it be the Emil Frey Racing team who will take victories once more today? Be very interesting to see as we also have a lot of Pro-Am cars right at the front of the grid. And indeed, it was a Pro-Am car of Tom Onslow Cole who took pole position in qualifying this morning in the SPS Automotive Mercedes. Onslow Cole pipping Matt Griffin at the end of what was a very, very keenly contested qualifying session. Meanwhile, there is Christopher Frogger at the wheel of the Spirit of Race Tempesta Racing Ferrari. We also have got returning to the fold this weekend the HTP Motorsport Winwood racing car of Indy Doncia and Russell Ward, which is near identical in livery to the HTP car of Aleksandra Raquina and Martin Conrad. This is the Raquina and Conrad car that races in the AM class, number 25. Of course, 3 classes in the field. You've got the Pro class, which you would expect to compete for the overall victory, the Pro-Am class, and then the AM class. It's Michael Grenier looks to wind his way towards his position on the grid. So the front row of the grid will be Tom Onslow Cole and Matt Griffin. Then it's Indy Doncia and Alberto Di Folco on row 2. It's Nicola Di Marco in the remaining Lazarus Lamborghini. Rolls into 17th place on the grid, the car that Di Marco shares with German driver Nicholas Pola. Another car with a fair amount to do this afternoon is the Ombra Racing Lamborghini of Naji Razak and Federico Leo. Razak qualifying in 19th place overall. The pit lane now more or less emptied of cars, which means all the mechanics and spectators heading to the grid to watch this very full field of supercars beginning to form up. Alam Kader starting from 13th place in the Teo Martin Motorsport squad there. 3 McLarens were probably the biggest losers in qualifying this morning when we had a red flag with 3 3/4 minutes remaining after Fabio Bonidi came fairly distant second in a disagreement with the barrier coming out of the final turn, and a lot of the Mercedes squads had already done their best runs, but the 3 McLarens were all just about to go into flying laps, and with the time remaining in the session they couldn't quite then go back through the heat cycle. So that means Fran Rhoda leads the McLaren charge from 5th on the grid, Martin Kodrich in 9th, and then Alam Kader in 13th. Thomas Jaeger, another driver be looking to move through the field. He starts in 10th place in the Row Racing Sun Energy Mercedes, one of the cars that we've got an onboard camera with this weekend. The entry that he shares alongside the Australian driver, Kenny Harble. So here is our pole sitter, Tom Onslow Cole, the reigning Pro-Am champion, alongside Valentin Pierberg. And Onslow Cole looking absolutely superb throughout the course of qualifying. Seemed to be thoroughly enjoying himself as well. And what he will be hoping for is a good start to the race. Alongside him then, on the front row of the grid, is Matt Griffin in the Spirit of Race Ferrari of himself and Duncan Cameron. And Griffin always to be found at the front of the field. Third on the grid to Indy Doncia in the HTP Motorsport Winwood Racing Mercedes, making their seasonal debut in the International GT Open and immediately right on the pace. Fourth on the grid, the Raton Racing by Target Lamborghini of Alberto Di Folco and Christoph Lenz. This was the car that was quickest in free practice yesterday, and Di Folco retaining that pace all the way through qualifying. Fran Rader then to start from 5th position. Rader, who retired just a couple of corners into the second race in Paul Ricard, will be hoping that he and Andres Saravia can head back to the podium this afternoon. The first, the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes, lines up in 6th position. That is the car of Alessio Rivera and Daniel Zampieri. Zampieri and Rivera runners up in race 2 in Paul Ricard. Rivera fully focused on the job ahead. Row 4 is going to be an all Emil Frey Racing row, with Michael Grenier lining up in 7th place. Grenier was an early retirement in race 1 before winning race 2 in Ricard, and then Albert Costa and Giacomo Altoe alongside. Albert Costa taking to the start. Thumbs up from the ever-positive Spaniard, but he's got a fair amount to do from the 4th row of the grid because the field were very, very, very closely matched in qualifying. Top 20 cars separated by just about 2 seconds. So the grid buzzing. Martin Kodrich was spectacular on his debut in the championship in France, and expect to see him making progress from 9th on the grid, with then 10th on the grid completed by the Row Racing Mercedes. So start of the season, it was Alan Kader who led away from pole position as they charged towards the first corner of the season. Plenty of battling throughout the field, but it was the Albert Costa, Giacomo Altoe Lamborghini that was managing the strategy perfectly throughout, although chased very hard late on by the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren of Enrique Chavez and Martin Kodrich, 3rd place to Fran Rader and Andres Saravia. Second race of the season, and drama through turn 2, coming together between Fran Rader, Enrique Chavez, and then a thump as Marcello Hahn was left nowhere to go and clattered into Fran Rader. So it's victory for Michael Grenier and Norbert Siedler, just ahead on the road of Fabrizio Cristani, Miguel Ramos, but that was switched late on. They were demoted to 3rd, and it was Rivera and Zampieri who were moved up to 2nd. So the 1-minute board being shown to the drivers, it's reasonably safe to assume that I'm not sure the word has got back down the grid, because there are still a lot of people looking to move clear of the cars. So thank you for joining us in Hockenheim, the 3rd race of the International GT Open season, and this is how they line up. Tom Onslow Cole and Matt Griffin on the front row. Row 2, Indy Doncia and Alberto Di Folco. Row 3 of the grid, then Fran Rader and Alessio Rivera. Row 4, all Emil Frey Racing, Michael Grenier and Albert Costa. Row 5, Martin Kodrich and Thomas Jaeger. On to row 6, Jiatong Liang and Ollie Wilkinson. Wilkinson this weekend partnered by Darren Turner. Alan Kader in 13th, ahead of Davide Rhoda, who takes AM class pole position. Miguel Ramos and Christopher Froggatt on row 8. Then Nicola DeMarco and Frederick Dorf on row 9. Naji Razak and Giuseppe Cipriani on the 10th row. From Antonio Coimbra and Aleksandra Raquina. And then Janine Hill to complete the field. So that is how they line up in full. We have got 70 minutes ahead of us, and it is race, of course, with the mandatory pit stops that come between the 28th and 42nd minute. That is where the element of strategy will come into play. All the drivers equipped as well with the Control Compound Michelin tyre. So the 15-second board shown to the drivers, and then they will be away, waved away on their green flag formation lap. Last chance to see how the conditions have changed since qualifying around this Hockenheim circuit. And the percussive blast of these cars as they get the power down, making the commentary box, which this weekend has got a position overlooking the final sector, absolutely vibrate as the cars power away. And this really is a mouth-watering prospect. You could make a case for probably any one of 10 or so cars taking victory this afternoon, depending on how strategies play through, depending on how teams are using their tyre allocation for the weekend. Of course, if we get any interruptions with a safety car, then that may be a factor as well. So this should be really very entertaining. First time out in Hockenheim for the International GT Open. It's been several years since the championship was last in action in Germany on a very, very cold weekend at the Nürburgring. So weaving around Tom Onslow Cole, getting a little bit of heat into the tyres as we go in car with Chris Froggatt in the Tempesta Racing Ferrari that he shares with Eddie Cheever III. And thinking back to Paul Ricard, Cheever was absolutely phenomenal in the second half of the second race of the weekend. So we will look forward to his progress, particularly as Froggatt well up of the Pro-Am qualifiers. He was the foremost of the AM drivers in the Pro-Am class in qualifying, 16th overall. Within the Pro-Am class, actually most of the entries looking to put the Pro in for this morning's qualifying session. This field winding out of turn 8. In car with Froggatt, he's just behind Miguel Ramos in the second of the SPS Mercedes. Just those accelerations and decelerations starting to warm the Michelin tyres a little bit. As here is the field beginning to bunch up as they head through turn 11 on towards the Sacs curve. Glimpse there of the Oxford Motorsport Aston Martin, as we said. Darren Turner alongside Ollie Wilkinson this weekend. Nerves beginning to rise in the Teo Martin Motorsport pit box. It's Duncan Cameron to the right of your picture. Thumbs up from Duncan. He'll be hoping that Matt Griffin can maybe get the jump on Onslow Cole in car with Michael Grenier. See how tightly bunched they are. This final sector of the lap, the road is quite narrow compared to many of the circuits on which we race. Therefore, the cars running in very close formation as the pace car peels into the pit lane. It's now the responsibility of Onslow Cole and Griffin to set the tempo of the field as we're about to go racing for the third time this year in the International GT Open, waiting for those lights to change, which they do now, and away we go. It's a good start from Griffin. It's also well away from Indy Doncia and Fran Rader as they turn through the first corner. It's Griffin who leads as they all run wide, but Matt Griffin has got the advantage. No contact through the field, and it's Griffin ahead of Onslow, Cole, Doncia, and also Alberto Di Folco. Fran Rader looks to the inside of the HTP Motorsport Mercedes. In car with Thomas Jaeger. He's in the thick of the action. He's been passed actually by Ollie Wilkinson and possibly Aleksandra as Albert Costa looking to make ground early on as Rader squeezes Costa through the barrier. Oh, that's a brilliant move from Costa. If he fought his way through, there looked like there was some contact as he somehow elbowed his way past Rader and Alberto Di Folco. So they went through the parabolica. We might get another look at it. But Albert Costa seemed to go for a gap in the middle and went for it, but he may have lost out on the run now down out of the hairpin as Griffin leads from Onslow Cole, then Doncia, Di Folco, Rhoda, and then it's Costa and Grenier side by side. Aleksandra had a superb first lap, and he has made up a lot of ground as the leading trio really breaking clear of this titanic squabble for fourth place. Martin Kodrich looking to the inside of Alessio Rivera, and through goes Kodrich. Rivera runs out a little bit wide. Ollie Wilkinson making good progress as Christopher Froggatt goes flying across the gravel trap in the Tempesta Racing Ferrari. In car with Thomas Jaeger. He's just behind Jietong Liang, and they are busy fighting over 12th and 13th as Griffin leads the way through at the end of the first lap. Albert Costa out over the dirt on the exit of the final corner. That is going to allow Aleksandra past him. There's certainly no calls being given between the Emil Frey Racing teammates. Nicola DeMarco, Naji Razak fight further down the order. Thomas Jaeger looking to try and pick his way past the Ang. Frederick Schandorf also well up as well, and Schandorf goes around the outside of Jaeger. Snatches the place. Back in car with Thomas Jaeger. There is Frederick Schandorf in front of us in the Vincenzo Sospiri Racing Lamborghini. The leading train of cars, meanwhile, arriving into the hairpin at turn 6 once more. Oh, Liang has a huge instant and smashes into the side of one of the Mercedes, and Jietong Liang just missed his braking point completely. It's torpedoed one of the other cars, and that is Alessio Rivera in the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes, who was completely innocent in that and has sustained a fair amount of damage to the rear of the car, as indeed has Liang's front of the car. Undoubtedly, that is going to bring out the safety car. Indeed, it has. So there is debris all over the place up at the hairpin. So after a thrilling start to the race, and there you see that the rear of Rivera's car that has been completely stoved in. Jietong Liang out of the front of the Raton by Target Lamborghini. Glad to see he is okay. Fortunately, as you can tell, the car rather less so. And so the completion of 1.5 racing laps, the safety car is out. Matt Griffin leads the way from Tom Onslow Cole and Indy Donche. Then it's Alberto Di Folco in 4th, Fran Rader 5th, Michael Grenier in 6th, Aleksandra is 7th, Albert Costa in 8th, Martin Kodrich in 9th, and Ollie Wilkinson complete stop down. Wilkinson very lucky in that, because if, as and when we see a replay, and we will now, so here's the Yang, he goes defending from Schandorf, misses his braking point, somehow misses Ollie Wilkinson, but absolutely torpedoes the completely innocent Alessio Rivera, and that a very, very nasty impact. And I rather fear that that may be it for this weekend for both of those cars. In-car Christopher Froggatt picking his way through the debris field. Giuseppe Cipriani taking evasive action. And safety car here has got a little bit of a dilemma about where to lead the field. There's scattered bits of Lamborghini, unfortunately, all over the place over at turn 6. So through they go. The Ang's car being moved aside. There is the car of Alessio Rivera, just behind one of the course cars. Is the driver of car 6 out of the car okay? As the field bunching up behind the safety car. Now, what this really starts to do is begin to play into some of the strategies that the teams are running, because we're going to be behind the safety car, I would imagine, for a couple of laps. And for those in the Pro-Am class that have got their Pro in the second half of the race, that gives them a slight advantage. For others that maybe were holding brand new tyres in reserve for the second half of the race, again, that gives them a slight advantage, as it doesn't really stretch the field. So, for example, Ollie Wilkinson, another driver who may well take advantage of things as the race unfolds. So the safety car on track there is Frederick Shawn, Dorf, and he is just behind the Optimum Motorsport Aston Martin, Ollie Wilkinson and Darren Turner for Matt Griffin, weaving around, just trying to maintain the temperature in the Michelin rubber. Aleksandra, a driver who really benefits in the early stage, she's leapt up into 7th position from relatively lowly 13th on the grid. Fran, where he qualified in 5th. Martin Kodrich still in 9th place. The car of Janine Hill currently in 21st position, so it is just Rivera and Liang who we have lost. The safety car continuing to circulate. This then the start of the 4th lap of the race. They will we will see in a few moments' time what the recovery work looks like, how it's proceeding over at the hairpin at turn 6. So when we do get going again, it will be the responsibility of Matt Griffin to choose the moment to pull the trigger. Onslow Colt looking to try and retaliate and pick his way past him. There's still work ongoing, as you can tell from the circuit vehicles over at the hairpin. Antonelli Motorsport team anxious on the pit wall. There is, I think, still a little bit of work ongoing with the car of Alessio Rivera. And there you see good news on the bottom of your screen. So Alessio Rivera is okay, but is going to the medical centre for a check over. So Jietong Liang we saw walk away, and there is confirmation, pleased to see, that Alessio Rivera is also okay, but is going to be given a precautionary check anyway in the medical centre, because when you see these cars have incidents, although it sounds slightly silly, when a driver knows that they've lost control under their own steam, they are able to brace for the impact. It's when you have an impact like that one just sustained by Alessio Rivera, where you are completely unprepared for an incident, and you get hit at very high velocity by another vehicle. That's when you've maybe not sort of tensed yourself for the impact, and that's where you can really sustain some bumps and bruises. So the right decision to take him to medical centre for a checkup, but glad that the word is that he is basically okay. So we're going to have at least one more lap behind the safety car, and that means it's going to take us over 10 minutes of race duration. So the pit window opens when we have got 42 minutes left on the race clock. And so this safety car eating in fairly substantially to the first stint of the race. The order there, Matt Griffin from Tom Onslow Cole, Tidonchia in 3rd, Alberto Di Folco in 4th, in 5th place Fran, 6th Michael Grenier, 7th Alan Kader, 8th is Albert Costa, 9th Martin Kodrich, and then in 10th place Ollie Wilkinson. All eyes focused on monitors in the HTP Motorsport pit box, and with good reason, Indy Donchi there in 3rd position. Made a very good start as well, just was squeezed out as they headed towards turn 1 to the safety car. Good news is going to be in at the end of this lap. And the cars weaving around. The safety car then will be in on this lap, and you may, in that shot of the HTP Motorsport pit, have recognised a familiar face, the German racing legend Bernd Schneider, casting an eye over things for the team this weekend. And Ollie Wilkinson celebrating his 23rd birthday today in the Optimum Motorsport. Mr. Martin, possibly, you'd argue this is not a bad birthday present in that he was somehow able to escape that incident between Liang and Rivera. And massive impact into the rear of the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes of Alessio Rivera. Jiatong Liang, hugely frustrated. He was busy dicing with Frederick Dorf and just fractionally late on the brakes into the hairpin, and that is all it takes. So the lights out on the safety car, and it's now Matt Griffin who paces the field through the hairpin at the Sacs curve, waiting for the right moment to pull the pin. But actually the safety car not building up much of an advantage over Griffin, which is one of the reasons he's not gone yet, because if he was to accelerate now, he would still catch the safety car. But Matt Griffin, very, very experienced. This sort of thing he goes now as they head into the final turn. And at the start of the 6th lap of the race, we go back to green flag conditions. The cars thunder through. And nobody's really gained much of an advantage from that restart, but they're all very, very tightly bunched as they take varying angles of attack through turn 1. And then up towards turn 2, Rhoda busy defending from Grenier's Alain Kader, looking to fend off Albert Costa. Martin Kodrich trying to join in that fight as well, as Matt Griffin looking to try and break away from Tom Onslow Cole. Pack on towards the hairpin at turn 6. Lots of jostling for position. The slight snatch of the brake in car with Christopher Froggatt. He has got Aleksandra Traquina right in front of him. But no drama at the hairpin this time around. Instead, we've just got this train of cars all the way back to Giuseppe Cipriani, pretty much running as one. Nobody quite able to make the move just yet, as Wilkinson trying to stay in touch with Martin Kodrich. And into turn 11, there indeed is Kodrich, the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren, in turn pursuing Albert Costa as they get on the brakes into the Sacs curve. Thomas Jaeger tucked up behind Frederick Dorf. For Matt Griffin, how much can he stretch the field before the pit window opens? He and Thomas Onslow both like to stay out fairly deeply into the pit window. As the cars all blast through. This time around, they're all a little bit more circumspect through turn 1. They've got to be careful with track limits here this weekend. That's Davide Rhoda, by the way, in the Antonelli Motorsport Mercedes. And Davide Rhoda leading the AM class at the moment and doing a very fine job of it. As Onslow Cole gets a good run on Matt Griffin as they head along the back stretch in towards the Parabolica turn at 5 and on towards the hairpin. Matt Griffin, though, will know exactly where to place the Ferrari. Onslow Cole, ditto in the Mercedes. Matt Griffin just about retains the lead as the cars all close up on each other under braking. And the braking distance of these GT3 cars very, very short, as unfortunately more bad news for the Antonelli Motorsport team, as into the pit lane comes Giuseppe Cipriani. And possibly a little bit of a bump to the front right corner of the car. It may have knocked something loose inside. So that leaves Davide Rhoda leading the team's charge, and he's currently 13th overall, right in the midst of the action. As the race leaders already coming towards the end of another lap. And compared to Paul Ricard, really quite short laps here at Hockenheim. Is helping to keep the field really tightly bunched, as Matt Griffin, again, coming under a little bit of pressure from Onslow Cole. Frederick, Shawn, Dorf trying to get on turns with Ollie Wilkinson. He has got just behind him Thomas Jaeger. We ride in car now with Jaeger. Shawn Dorf just out over the curb, kicks up a little bit of dust. No particular issue for him. Somebody else piles through on towards turn 2. Martin Kodrich still in 9th place, unable to do much about Albert Costa. Back in car now with Michael Grenier. Fran Rhoda just in front of us. Accelerating out towards the hairpin at turn 6. Although this leading group are all close together, there's nobody at the moment who just seems to be in a position to challenge to replace Aleksandra, the man looking most likely to, as he just gives Michael Grenier a little bit of a tap to remind him he's there at the apex of the hairpin. As they peel into turn 7. In car with Michael Grenier now. Where is Aleksandra? He's not darting to the inside, so that's on the corner for Grenier. You can see what he's doing. He's just sticking to the racing line, following Fran Rhoda and making the car behind do all the hard work. Now, the really nice thing that we saw in Paul Ricard and again this weekend is, although we've got Ferrari versus Mercedes versus Lamborghini versus McLaren all at the front of the field, the performance between the car and Aston Martin, the performance between the cars all very closely balanced. And certainly, it's only really through the second and third sets of that where the Mercedes may have a little bit on the Ferrari, but the Ferrari of Matt Griffin very strong through the first sector, as we can see now. See, navigates turn 1, having just set the fastest lap of the race, a 1 minute 39.417. Builds up his lead over Tom Onslow Cole to 1.2 seconds. The pit window opening in just over 10 minutes' time. So they're going to have time for probably 6 or so laps before strategy starts to come into play. The SBS Automotive team, all calm on the pit wall. And their cars currently in 2nd and 16th position. Kader a little bit deep into the hairpin, and that opens the door to Albert Costa, who pushes Kader out wide. Kader looks to try and force his way back onto the circuit, but Albert Costa may fancy his chance into turn 7. Side by side they go, and the Lamborghini jinks in front of the McLaren. Wasn't really an awful lot Kader could do about that, and he's now immediately under pressure from teammate Martin Kodrich. Kodrich would like to find a way past Aleksandra. He's not able to do so just at the moment, as that group of cars, though, just easing clear of Ollie Wilkinson in 10th position. But still, we've got the top 12 cars covered by just 9.9 seconds, and once pit stops play through, then that can will start to have a little bit of an impact. So into turn 1 once more. Indy Doncic in 3rd place. 3rd in the Pro-Am class as well. The top 4 cars in the race all in the Pro-Am class. And that, particularly as Fran Rader and Andres Saravia aren't carrying any success seconds over, and Paul Ricard potentially plays quite nicely into their hands, particularly as we know that Michael Grenier and Norbert Seidler will have additional time in the pits based on their victory. But traffic will certainly be a concern, because what we haven't really seen so far this race is an obvious overtaking place around this track, particularly when these cars are that evenly matched. So it is all fairly tense in the Teo Martin Motorsport pit. Rader at the moment, he's leading the pro class. He's just maybe letting the battle in front of him unfold a little bit, particularly Matt Griffin can just start to elevate the pace. And if Rader can ease away from Michael Grenier, then he will consider that to be not unreasonable position to be in. Meanwhile, Aleksandra looking to try and get back onto terms with Albert Costa. Martin Kodrich looking to stay with them. So coming towards the end of the 10th lap of the race. Matt Griffin leading the way with fastest lap to his name, and he set that last time around. And he goes fractionally quicker again this time, a 1 minute 39.0 for Matt Griffin. So as the fuel load lightens in the Ferrari, just beginning to try and stretch the pack. In car with Michael Grenier. Now Grenier in 6th. He's now 1.4 seconds back from Fran Rader. Possibly a little bit more than that as they arrive into turn 2. This is where the circuit peels away from the original track that would have disappeared out into the forest on towards the Ost curve. Instead, the track winds through this back straight section of the Parabolica on towards the hairpin at turn 6. This is where the track then rejoins briefly the old circuit. We'll flash the headlights from Aleksandra, just a friendly reminder to Albert Costa that he's there, and if possible he'd like to come past him. Albert Costa, though, has seen this sort of thing many times before. He's unlikely to be flustered. Matt Griffin, meanwhile, is on course for another very good lap. Griffin's lead over Onslow Cole now out to 2 seconds. The second half of the race is going to be absolutely fascinating in terms of the overall race victory, but also the class wins as well. In the AM class, it's Davide Rhoda who leads from Antonio Coimbra and Janine Hill. Meanwhile, slight upping of the pace from Fran Rader as well in 5th. He's just on the fastest middle sector of anybody. As we look at the battle for 6th, Michael Grenier from Albert Costa, Aleksandra and Martin Kodrich, the 2 Emil Frey Racing Lamborghinis, ahead of the 2 Teo Martin Motorsport McLarens. Another bumpy ride over the curbs for Michael Grenier as he accelerates out of turn 1, blast to turn 2, then he picks the apex. Winds through turns 3 and 4, propel him towards, well, it's not really the back straight, it is the back flat-out section of the track. All the while, the pit window opening gets ever nearer, now just 5 minutes away. The field closing up on the brakes again into the hairpin. Emil Frey Racing Conference in full effect in the pit box, I guess, wondering at what point do they consider pitting either or both car. The pit window open for about 14 minutes or so, so they've got quite a big window in terms of playing through some of the strategies. And what we don't know is, essentially, is Michael Grenier running at absolutely the limit of the pace of the car, or are they maybe playing a slightly longer game, trying to make the tyres last a little bit longer into the stint? They're trying to maybe do something in terms of looking after the car, conserving it for later on in the race. Meanwhile, all poised and ready to go on the Teo Martin Motorsport pit wall. It's Matt Griffin out of turn 1. Another fastest lap of the race for Griffin last time around, a 1 minute 38.9. And Griffin's advantage over Onslow Cole now out to 2.6 seconds. Onslow Cole in second place. He's got a second advantage over Indy Donja. We've got one car with a track limit warning. That's Michael Grenier at turn 1. And we kind of suspected that may have been coming, having ridden in car with him for a couple of laps and taken the bumpy ride on the curbs. And at the moment, the race is just in one of those phases where everybody is keeping it tight and just waiting to see how the race will unfold. Alberto Di Folco looming ever larger in the mirrors of Indy Donja, and the main reason for that is that Fran Rader is steadily chipping away at Alberto Di Folco's advantage. Only by a couple of hundredths here or there, but all the while just eases ever closer. Rader out over the curbs through turn 11 into the Sacs curve, then the cambered left-hand hairpin under the gaze of the tribunes before the run through the final couple of sequence of corners. The double right-handers to end the lap. Ollie Wilkinson, meanwhile, in 10th, still with Frederick Shawn right behind him now. The gap from Kodrick in 9th to Wilkinson in 10th has gone up to 4.7 seconds. And that's Darren Turner, works Aston Martin driver, waiting to take over. So it'll be fascinating to see where the Optima Motorsport Aston Martin ends up by the checker flag. Meanwhile, Thomas Jaeger in a position to challenge Shawn as they come out of turn 1. And the Vincenzo Spiri Racing Lamborghini was just a little bit wild over the curbs. Jaeger trying to take advantage as Shawn keeps the car tight through turn 2. They're being joined by the Umbra Racing Lamborghini of Naji Razak, who is closing up onto their tail as well. Meanwhile, Albert Costa's the inside Michael Grenier at the hairpin at turn 6. So Albert Costa moves up into 6th position. Interesting move that from the Emil Frey Racing team. But Costa and Giacomo Altoe in pursuit of their 2nd win of the season, and that's what they will be thinking about relative to track position to Fran Rhoda. Rhoda currently 2.5 seconds ahead of the brace of Lamborghinis. So what can Costa do with some clear air for the first time today? He goes in as deep as he dares to the Sacs curve. Another look at the mover, and Costa out of the toe to the inside. Michael Grenier, obviously it's his teammate, he's not going to shut the door on him. And Costa able to ease past. Race leader Matt Griffin on his 15th lap. And Griffin, having got the jump on Onslow Cole at the start of the race, has thereafter been unheaded and has now got a near enough 4-second lead over Tom Onslow Cole as he blasts through the sunshine on towards the hairpin. Meanwhile, Onslow Cole has got Indy Doncia right behind him, and this is a battle that hasn't really ever eased off. But challenge being in multi-mark racing, often you've got, if you're racing a car of a different manufacturer, you'll be stronger elsewhere on the circuit compared to it, as Jaeger and Shawn getting a little bit too close for comfort, and that almost played Naji Razak in. But where you're racing a car that is, to all intents and purposes, barring setup, identical to your own, then it's very, very hard to find a way through. But the pit lane is now open, so expect to see some driver changes coming fairly soon. This is where the strategy element of the race will really start to kick in. Indy Doncia closing up onto Tom Onslow Cole as they head into the final couple of turns on the lap. Matt Griffin through and on his way. But into the pit lane has come Martin Kodrick. So Martin Kodrick into pits, as is Fran Rhoda. So the Teo Martin Motorsport McLarens rolling the dice early in the pit window. It is going to be Andres Saravia for Fran Rhoda. It's going to be Enrique Chavez for Martin Kodrick. Also Darren Turner, not unsurprisingly, to take over from Ollie Wilkinson. Also Fabrizio Cristani will take over from Miguel Ramos, and Eddie Cheever will take over from Chris Froggatt. We've got an incident, however, as we watch Cheever and Froggatt switch places. I can tell you that there's yellow flags out over at the Sacs curve hairpin. Try and work out who hasn't come through. I think it's Davide Rhoda who has gone off as Cristani gets strapped in. Also, all change Aleksandra Frequina and Martin Conrad. There it is Davide Rhoda, who's pirouetted into the gravel trap, and that, I fear, may bring us a safety car. He's right at the edge of the gravel trap, and that would throw some of the strategies in this race absolutely onto their head, particularly for those that have pitted early, rejoining now. And those that haven't pitted may well really suffer if we do get a safety car. Meanwhile, Frederick Shawn and Thomas Jaeger busy battling. Now this is the section of the circuit which has got all covered by yellow flags. There is Davide Road. They're going to try and recover it under waved yellow flags for several turns. As Matt Griffin continues on his way, Fabrizio Crostani just emerges from the pits. Also in is one of the Emil Frey Racing Lexus, not Lexus, that was a couple of years ago. It's one of the Lamborghinis, and it is Norbert Seidler who'll take over from Michael Grenier. So all change in the pits now, and a lot of the field getting their pit stops done nice and early, which is very, very interesting. So no rush then for racing next team here, Lamborghini team rather. Here is Andres Saravia, and Saravia, of those that have pitted, is, for my money, ahead of the queue from Enrique Chavez and Darren Turner. It's Janine Hill also into the pit lane, and that is John Schaffner who'll take over. Fabrizio Crostani on track currently behind Matt Griffin. He's got Eddie Cheever just behind him. So of those that have pitted, it is Saravia who is 4.9 seconds clear of Chavez, and a further 10 seconds back to Darren Turner. Not quite yet at half race distance, and we've got about half the field that have pitted straight away into the pit window, and the other half of the field pressing on. Now the challenge here for Matt Griffin and Thomas Lecos, they're both in and amongst the traffic, such as the length of the lap here, and Griffin has got Christoph Lenz, who's just joined the track just behind him, and he is in pursuit of Nicholas Pola in the Lazarus Lamborghini. And the frustration here for Matt Griffin and the Spirit of Race Ferrari team is they would have been hoping for some clear track just to continue to stretch the field. But Griffin gets caught in amongst the traffic, particularly with cars on fresh tyres. That may just work a little bit against he and Duncan Cameron later on. It's the same for Onslow Cole with Valentin Pierberg. All the while, though, Matt Griffin's lead has grown. It's now 5.4 seconds. And it really is fascinating to think how this race is going to unwind itself. Norbert Seidler, meanwhile, has emerged just behind Darren Turner, as Griffin looking to try and force the move into the Sacs curve. Can't quite squeeze past Nicholas Pola there. And of course, at this stage in the race, Pola is still essentially racing for himself. He's not a bona fide lap down, so he doesn't really have the necessity of leaping aside. Meanwhile, just behind this battle, Fabrizio Crostani is right up with Christoph Lenz in a battle for position. Just in the background, Alan Achiever part of that fight as well. And here comes Crostani. Still Griffin looking to try and clear Pola. I guess the only good thing here for Matt Griffin is that it is similarly painful for Onslow Cole. He's tucked up behind the Lenz, Crostani and Cheever fight. And Indy Doncia part of that mix as well. Emil Frey Racing keeping Albert Costa out there though, in 4th place. Waiting to change over to Giacomo Altoe, as to the inside now goes Matt Griffin, to the inside Nicholas Pola, makes the manoeuvre. So the pit window open until there are 28 minutes left on the clock, so there's an abundance of time here for Matt Griffin, and now that he is clear of Nicholas Pola, he's got a little bit of daylight on towards Norbert Seidler, and Seidler will be running pretty rapidly in the Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini. Now meanwhile, in car with Eddie Cheever, and that is what he saw, which is Crostani to the inside of Christoph Lenz, and then Cheever taking advantage as well and easing past. So potentially today could end up being a very good one for the Spirit of Race Ferrari team, the Tempesta Racing entry, as both the Ferraris in the race are well poised to get a strong result in the Pro-Am class, not the race overall. Meanwhile, Andres Saravia has just set the fastest lap of the race overall, 1:38.602. So he now leads teammate Enrique Chavez by 5.1 seconds. And then Darren Turner a further 11 seconds back from that group. That is the battle of those that have pitted. Those that have not pitted, we will have to wait and see. Into the pit lane now comes Albert Costa. Giacomo Altoe to take over. The Emil Frey Racing team getting to work. No need to overly dramatise things here. They'll work quickly, but not hurriedly. There is also a very, very good scrap going on in the AM class I can tell you about, which is John Schuffner, Martin Conrad, and are busy fighting away over second in the AM class. Antonio Coimbra leads that at the moment, but he has not yet pitted. So here is the Onslow Cole and Indy Doncia battle for second and third in the race, second and third in the Pro-Am class as well at the moment. And they have got now about a 6-second advantage over Alam Kader. So those that haven't pitted, it is predominantly the Pro-Am class runners with the pro driver. It's Onslow Cole making his way through towards the end of the 20th lap of the race. Matt Griffin, his lead over Onslow Cole, now that Griffin's back into clear air, goes out to 6.1 seconds, just over half race distance. I think we are going to be in for a very, very exciting second half of this race, because Giacomo Altoe has emerged from the pits just 1 second behind Enrique Chavez in the Toyota Motorsport McLaren. So you've got Saravia from Chavez, from Altoe, all separated by about 6 seconds in the battle to lead the race of those that have pitted, as Federico Leo will take over from Naji Razak in the Umbra Racing Lamborghini. 32 minutes to go, so there's going to be time for a couple more laps for the Pro-Am cars that are still out circulating. Meanwhile, the Altoe-Chavez battle is just heading into the final couple of turns on the track now. This is the fight for the second place, still between Onslow Cole and Indy Doncia. The pair of them have been flying in formation throughout the course of the first half of the race. And they will have the opportunity, if they so desire, for one more lap, I think, before they have to come in and make the pit stop. Matt Griffin is certainly going to take advantage of that lap, as will Onslow Cole and Doncia, because, of course, with that lengthy safety car early on, for the Pro-Am cars that starts with the pro driver, they really need all that window, as Chiva looking to like the move on Nicholas Pola. They're fighting over 15th and 16th at the moment. So again, of those that have pitted, it's Andres Saravia who is at the head of that queue, from Enrique Chavez, then Giacomo Altoe, Darren Turner and Norbert Seidler. But it really depends where these Pro-Am cars feed out into the mix. And the expectation would be that they will all emerge towards the front of the field, as Chiva looks to try and light the move on Pola. And it'll be a case of, well, how long can those drivers keep some of the pros behind them? Meanwhile, Chiva bobbing and weaving behind Nicholas Pola. They're having a good scrap. They're not actually particularly being reeled in by the Mercedes, as Chiva darts the inside of Pola now, in car with Chiva. Flouts the curb, but it would appear from what we can see that he's made the move over the Lazarus Lamborghini. Swedi Chiva moves up into 15th position. And there's not quite, well, not quite a lap time in it before the pit window closes. So the last clutch of cars peeling into the pit lane on this lap, and Matt Griffin is the first among them. Here comes Onslow Cole as well. So now it's a case of simultaneously watching the pit lane, watching the timing screen, and watching the position of Andres Saravia in the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. It's Duncan Cameron in for Matt Griffin. That was a great drive from Griffin. Onslow Cole rolls to halt. Valentin Pierberg will take over the SPS Automotive Mercedes from him. So the pit lane suddenly getting very full once more. Russell Ward in for Indy Duncher 2. So Andres Saravia is somewhere in the middle sector on the lap. It's Thomas Jaeger, thumbs to a halt. Kenny Harble will take over from him. And Saravia is now, in my view, he's heading through the Sacs curve. So waiting for, it will be Duncan Cameron to be sent his way. First of all, here is Norbert Seidler. And Seidler is 3.6 seconds adrift of Darren Turner. Of those that have pitted, he is in 5th. As Andres Saravia accelerates past the commentary box as Duncan Cameron heads out of the pit lane. So it's Cameron who is going to be effectively the race leader. They are heading up towards turn 2 now. Here is Duncan Cameron out of the pits in the lead of the race. It's then Saravia into 2nd place. Valentin Pierberg will be in 3rd. Enrique Chavez in 4th. In 5th, it's Giacomo Altoe. They're in the blue Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini. So that is the top 5. So Cameron, his lead over Andres Saravia, 3 seconds. Pierberg a further 3 seconds back. But this, a big ask for Duncan Cameron. He, of course, didn't qualify this morning. He's out on cold tyres, and he has got a charging Andres Saravia, trying to reel him in. Saravia, who has set the fastest lap of the race as well. And in the background, Valentin Pierberg has got the same challenge. The progress of Enrique Chavez, of course, for Cameron and Griffin, much as they would love an outright race podium, they are also racing for Pro-Am honours. Here is Chiva to the inside of Nicholas Pola. Look at it from inside, and Edward Chiva straight to the inside. And Chiva is already making more progress. That is a pass on Federico Leo. The next target is John Schuffner, who's possibly a lap down. So Chiva is making great strides in the Pro-Am class. He is currently in 11th position overall. So post-pit stops, the classification is Duncan Cameron leads the way. 2nd is Andres Saravia. 3rd, it's Valentin Pierberg. 4th, Enrique Chavez. 5th, Giacomo Altoe. 6th, Russell Ward. 7th, Darren Turner. 8th, Norbert Seidler. 9th, Marcello Hahn. And 10th, Fabrizio Crestani. That top 10 covered by 30 seconds. The top 9, though, covered by just 24 seconds. Big grin from Matt Griffin. He enjoyed that. And Duncan Cameron has got Saravia now just a second or so behind him, but Cameron all the while will be warming up. Michelin Tires warming himself up as well, getting into a rhythm. And we've seen through the first half of the race that if you stick to the racing line, then there's not masses that your rival can do about it. And Saravia and Rhoda looking to get their championship charge really underway in earnest. And the last thing that Andres Saravia wants to is risk the car with a rash move on Duncan Cameron, particularly with 25 minutes to go. So he will just continue to reel in the Spirited Race Ferrari now of. Leading group of cars, Giacomo Altoe is looking very rapid as well, as is Norbert Seidler, as Saravia thinks about a little bit of a move on Cameron into the Sacs curve. Cameron, though, just takes the racing line, and it's unlikely Andres Saravia is going to get too much joy through this final sector on the lap. The track, certainly compared to Paul Ricard, is fairly narrow. So the cars sprint through. This is to start lap 25 with just over 25 minutes to go. And now Saravia getting into the clutches of Duncan Cameron. Where's the opportunity going to present itself? Saravia looking to the inside into turn 2. Cameron sees him, and Saravia sneaks past, takes the lead of the race. It's Teo Martin, the eponymous principal of Teo Martin Motorsport, sitting in the centre of your picture. And he will be pleased with that. Always a moment of jeopardy. He went passing a car that's a little bit slower, just to make sure the move is done safely, but it was them. And now, Andres Saravia leading the way. Cameron in second, still leads the Pro-Am class. They're 4.3 seconds clear of Valentin Pierberg. There is Pierberg in the SPS Mercedes, who's third overall, second in the Pro-Am class. And he's not really being caught at the moment by Enrique Chavez and Giacomo Altoe, because Chavez and Altoe have got a battle royale underway at the moment. And they are busy fighting with each other. Here is a look at the past lead once more. Textbook stuff from Andres Saravia to the inside at turn 2. Job done. All smiles in the pits now. The key for Saravia is now just to try and stretch the field. The battle that's the really, really close one is the one currently underway for 4th position, because Giacomo Altoe is right with Enrique Chavez. Fran Rhoda moves through the garage as Saravia heads on his merry way. It is the second of the McLarens that is under real threat currently in 4th position. Just see at the back of your picture, there we go. And that battle is very close as Giacomo Altoe asking all the right questions of Enrique Chavez. And what it means is that this fight in turn isn't particularly closing up onto Valentin Pierberg in 3rd position. Or indeed, particularly rapidly, Duncan Cameron has lots of dust kicked up by Giacomo Altoe, just pushing a little bit too hard. And for the first time in a couple of laps, that gives some breathing space to Enrique Chavez. They're being caught as well at a rate of about 0.6 of a second a lap by Russell Ward and Darren Turner. And Russell Ward going very well in the HTP Motorsport Mercedes. We'll see that bright yellow car beginning to loom into view before too long in the back of the shot. He's not quite there yet. He's still 6 seconds adrift, but as I say, closing up very rapidly. So Andres Saravia's lead over Duncan Cameron, some 2.5 seconds. Valentin Pierberg in 3rd, 3.5 seconds back from that. And then this fight for 4th and 5th. It's also for 2nd and 3rd in the Pro class. In the Pro-Am class, it's Cameron from Pierberg, then Russell Ward, Marcello Hahn and Edward Cheever. And in the Am class, it's Luis Silva, who currently leads the way by a fraction of a second from Martin Conrad. So good fights all the way through the field and the prospect of many more to come. So that lap from Chavez and Altoe, 1 minute 40.0. That plays Russell Ward behind the 1 minute 39.7. So Ward getting a little bit closer. A look at the McLaren at work and the Lamborghini, both of the cars bouncing on the suspension, but Giacomo Altoe's team manager has been summoned to race control for Emil Frey Racing. Albert Costa will wonder why. The concern would possibly be track limits, as again Altoe getting onto terms with Enrique Chavez, and as they stop fighting with each other, it does allow them to close in a little bit onto Valentin Pierberg. Pierberg as well, inching ever closer to Duncan Cameron in the lead of the Pro-Am class. And Altoe's got a good run here on Chavez as they head down the second half of the back stretch. This is towards the stadium, and around the outside challenges Giacomo Altoe. The McLaren, though, well positioned by the Portuguese driver. So into the Sacs curve. Nothing doing, or is there? Yes, Enrique Chavez slithers wide. He has to get the power down to try and draw alongside Altoe, but Giacomo Altoe able to make the move up into 4th place. And that was really, really good driving from both of them. Would have been very easy to collide. But Giacomo Altoe has smuggled the position and now sets off in pursuit of Valentin Pierberg. Now, Altoe, for the first time in this stint, he is into clear air. His deficit to Andres Saravia is 10 seconds, but he does have 20 minutes to play with here, Giacomo Altoe. Saravia lapping in the high 1 minute 39 second bracket at the moment. Altoe has got Valentin Pierberg and Duncan Cameron to chase down and pass. They've also got the lap car of John Schaffner as well to worry about. Behind them, Russell Ward continues his pursuit. Darren Turner not really making masses of ground in the Aston Martin. It's Valentin Pierberg, third place overall. And he, at the moment, in terms of pace, is pretty much level pegging Duncan Cameron in second position. So there is Cameron leading the Pro-Am class, second place overall. And it is far from unlikely that we're going to see at least one of the Pro-Am cars on the outright race podium. Another look then at the pass, and it was really, Chavez just couldn't quite get the power down as he was out onto the slippery section of the circuit. And the car pitched into a bit of a spin. A round of applause from the Emil Frey Racing team. So leading the way, Andres Saravia. He's now 6 seconds clear. It's the battles going on behind, which are the ones that are really holding our attention. Giacomo Altoe, first lap in clear air, admittedly with traffic, so that was same pace as Valentin Pierberg, and Pierberg only 0.3 quicker than Duncan Cameron. Quite a few of them having to be mindful of track limits. Andres Saravia, 6.1 seconds his advantage. Duncan Cameron still 2.7 seconds clear of Valentin Pierberg. Giacomo Altoe, identical deficit to Pierberg. The driver is on the move here is Russell Ward in the HTP Motorsport Winwood Mercedes. There he is in the bright yellow car, who has been steadily homing in onto this group. We'll find out in due course exactly why Emil Frey Racing team have been summoned to race control, whether or not there's going to be any sort of penalty for Giacomo Altoe. Meanwhile, Darren Turner and Norbert Seidler are busy having a good battle over 7th and 8th place, it would appear. So here is the race leader, Andres Saravia. He and Fran Rhoda, third place in the first race of the season. Paul Ricard, retirees in race 2, but now, barring some sort of disaster, looking set for victory in this third race of the year. And as the cars fight behind, Saravia is one of the few in the field regularly lapping in the 1 minute 39 second bracket, and it really is allowing him to just stretch away at the front of the pack. I have to say though, the battle for second place down to 10th is still anybody's guess, because 9th and 10th, Fabrizio Crestani and Edward Cheever are lapping good second a lap or so more quicker than Duncan Cameron. They've got enough time in the race to begin to start to make that an issue, as Valentin Pierberg trying to chip away at Duncan Cameron. He's 2.6 seconds back still from the Pro-Am class leader, but now Giacomo Altoe is beginning to hunt Valentin Pierberg. Here's the battle then between Darren Turner and Norbert Seidler. This is for 7th and 8th position. Two very experienced drivers in the form of Turner and Seidler. They will be enjoying going wheel to wheel. In the background is Fabrizio Crestani, who is closing on this fight at a rate of about a second a lap or so. As they swing through turn 11 on towards the Sacs curve, they're going to have the car of John Schaffner to put a lap on fairly shortly. In the AM class now, Martin Conrad leads that from Luis Silva and John Schaffner. As Seidler thinking about a little bit of a move to the inside of the Aston Martin into the penultimate corner. Nothing doing. Darren Turner is able to cover it off. It's just under 15 minutes left on the clock. John Schaffner running a little bit wide through turn 1. Is that going to allow Darren Turner to complete the lap into turn 2? It does. And Seidler also able to pass the Mercedes, but not able to use it as an excuse to slingshot past Darren Turner. So they remain much as they were. Meanwhile, Russell Ward last time having not such a good lap, a 1:42.0 for Ward. So he's now being caught by this Turner and Seidler fight. And there in the background is Fabrizio Crestani, gaining on both of them very, very quickly. The challenge for Crestani, though, is going to be, if he does catch them, can he find a way past? Seidler's got a good run, heading into turn 7. He just has to jink back into position. And Darren Turner, you could learn a lot about defensive driving from watching him. He is barely deviating from the ideal racing line. He's making Norbert Seidler do all the effort, just playing to the strengths of the Aston Martin as he now blasts clear on the run towards turn 11. Tricky corner as the camber sort of just throws the cars out wide as they exit the corner, and then they can ride the camber through the Sacs curve. Good scrap this, though, as Andres Saravia continues to lead the way. 8.1 seconds now is advantage over Duncan Cameron, who remains 2.2 seconds clear of Valentin Pierberg. Giacomo Altoe, though, is now just 0.8 of a second adrift of Valentin Pierberg. Enrique Chavez is in 5th and fairly lonely. And then Russell Ward in 6th, whatever the moment was a couple of laps ago. He's recovered from it and has rebuilt his buffer over this squabble for 7th place between Darren Turner and Norbert Seidler. In 9th place, it's Fabrizio Crestani and Ed Pachiva completing the top 10. At the moment, the Pro-Am podium is Duncan Cameron from Valentin Pierberg and Russell Ward, as Seidler looks the outside into the hairpin, will try for the cut back and get the run down towards turn 7. He might have just pulled it off this time, as the shadows suggest the Lamborghini is alongside the Aston Martin. He rehearsed the move a lap ago, and this time Norbert Seidler does go through and up into 7th place. Really brilliantly executed move from Norbert Seidler, so he moves ahead of Darren Turner. Seidler's next target, and it is a fair old challenge, is Russell Ward in 6th position. That's some 4 and a bit seconds, though, for Seidler to try and make up. The next move that is ever increasingly likely as we continue to watch this fight for 7th is that the sister Emil Frey Racing Lamborghini of Giacomo Altoe is now right with Valentin Pierberg, as immediately Darren Turner is thrust into the clutches of Fabrizio Crestani. Crestani trying to threaten Turner. Here then is the fight for 3rd place, with Giacomo Altoe for the first time really in contact with Valentin Pierberg. Now, is this going to elevate Pierberg's pace to make it a 3-way tussle with Duncan Cameron? And we've seen this with Valentin Pierberg in the past, that sometimes when he's got a pro car around him as a reference point, he can really fly. Now, here is another look at the move from Seidler to the inside Darren Turner. Brilliantly executed. He set it up at this point into the hairpin, wide in, tightens it, means he gets on the throttle a little bit earlier, and therefore can draw alongside the Aston Martin. Absolutely nothing that Darren Turner could do about that. Round of applause from the Emil Frey Racing team. And as expected, their brace of Lamborghinis are right in the thick of the action. And look, Valentin Pierberg really is hunting down Duncan Cameron. So he's had the hurry up from Giacomo Altoe. Duncan Cameron, his last lap was a 1:41.0, but he's now got just a 1.5 second advantage over Valentin Pierberg. And with 10 minutes to go, this is a lot of pressure for Pierberg and Cameron to absorb from Giacomo Altoe, but Giacomo Altoe has just picked up a 3-second penalty for track limit violation. So if Altoe were to get through on the road, he needs to pull 3 seconds clear. At the moment, he would stay exactly where he is, because he's 3 seconds clear of Enrique Chavez. Chavez being pursued by Russell Ward, Norbert Seidler, likewise blasting clear of Darren Turner, who at the moment is just about managing to keep Fabrizio Cristani at arm's length. Admittedly quite a short arm. So for Altoe, the exam question has become a little bit more pointed, that not only does he need to make the pass, which he might do now, as Pierberg runs wide through the hairpin. He's then got to clear some 3 seconds over Valentin Pierberg. Between now and the checker flag, the other thing he's got to be mindful of as well, if he gets bottled up behind Pierberg, is that will allow the McLaren of Enrique Chavez to close onto his tail, and possibly that gap will drop under 3 seconds, and therefore it will cost Altoe a place. All sorts of high-speed maths and permutations to consider. This lap, though, appears to be a little bit slower for both Pierberg and Altoe, because they seem a little bit further back relative to Duncan Cameron. Pierberg on the brakes into the Sacs curve, taking the higher swooping line. Doesn't seem to have particularly delayed him. All the while, of course, this is allowing our race leader Andres Saravia to romp clear at the front of the pack, and he now is 10 seconds ahead of the rest of the field. But this fight for second, it is all just about closing up on itself. It's Pierberg 1.3 seconds behind Cameron. He was still fractionally quicker than Duncan Cameron last time around. And the other question, of course, is how much life have they got left in their tyres at this stage of the race, because we would be expecting maybe to see some of them just beginning to run a little bit shy of grip. That may play into the hands of Altoe. It may play into the hands of the cars that are slightly kinder on their tyres, as Pierberg appears to be inching towards Duncan Cameron again on this lap. But Pierberg runs wide out of the hairpin. He's done it a couple of times, and that might open the door to Giacomo Altoe, who looks to try and draw alongside the Mercedes, but he can't do it on the way into turn 7. Meanwhile, Fabrizio Cristani is all over Darren Turner. The Oxford Motorsport Aston Martin again having to fend off the SPS Automotive Mercedes. Where do you look? One Mercedes on the attack, the sister car from the SPS stable, busy defending from Altoe. And every lap that passes by for Giacomo Altoe becomes ever harder for him to find a way through and then pull clear by 3 seconds. This is a really fine drive from Duncan Cameron in second place, who has been able to maintain a very steady pace that Valentin Pierberg and Giacomo Altoe haven't really been able to make too much in the way of inroads to. So through turn 1 once more. All these battles coming to a head, and in the background as well you can see Edward Cheever, who's currently 3rd in the Pro-Am class, 4th in the Pro-Am class rather. He's got a little bit too much ground, I'd suggest, to try and cover to get to 3rd in the class. This is multi-mark GT racing at its very best. We've got the Ferrari versus the Mercedes versus the Lamborghini for second position. And they're all in pursuit of the McLaren. Again, just wonder if Altoe senses the hairpin is possibly a point where he can really pressurise Valentin Pierberg. This time Pierberg doesn't run wide. Doesn't make him any slower onto the straight. Not such that Altoe can take advantage. Altoe, likewise, doesn't see a hole opening up to the inside at turn 8, so he remains right where he is, behind Valentin Pierberg. All the while, this is allowing Duncan Cameron, as Pierberg defends a little bit, just to ease away in that second place. And this is shaping up to be a phenomenal result in the Pro-Am class for Matt Griffin and Duncan Cameron. Really great start to the race from Griffin, and Cameron doing a superb job, just matching the pace at the moment, if not exceeding it, of Valentin Pierberg. And Pierberg, at the same time, has been given the hurry up by Giacomo Altoe, but he is able to keep him behind for the time being. So through they go. Just 5 minutes left in this, the 3rd race of the season in the International GT Open. It's still wide open the last couple of spots on the rostrum. Andres Saravia, the race leader, is 11.2 seconds clear from second through to sixth. They're all covered by just 6 seconds. Again, the Mercedes can use the long stretch from turn 2 through to turn 6 just to try and open up a little bit of daylight over the Lamborghini, and then Pierberg has to stamp on the anchors. Doesn't run wide once more. He's just a little bit more tentative on the apex. There's a look at Andres Saravia, super slow motion now. Pierberg, I wonder whether he was being caught a little bit by Altoe coming out of the hairpin. Altoe seemed appreciably closer, indeed he was, and is now again asking questions of the Mercedes. And this is an example of good sustained pressure from Giacomo Altoe. He's clearly making Valentin Pierberg think about the hairpin at turn 6. Twice Pierberg ran wide, and then almost consciously to avoid the penalty, Pierberg has just given away a tenth of a second or two every lap thereafter through turn 6. It opens up some leverage for Altoe through the final couple of seconds of the lap. So into the penultimate lap of the race goes the race leader, Andres Saravia. He and Fran Rader have managed the perfect strategy for the afternoon, and they've also got fastest lap in their credit. So towards turn 1, again Altoe fills Valentin Pierberg's mirrors. Pierberg, though, driving with a real level of assurance, as is Duncan Cameron ahead of him. Cameron just being reeled in a little bit by Pierberg, not to cause any particular pressure. So this fight for second place, they've not quite... Well, Enrique Chavez has just faded a little bit in the second half of the race. He's not able to get to terms with them, and Russell Ward has never quite got to terms with Enrique Chavez. And now time is running out. If Altoe is going to make the move on the road, it's going to have to be bold. And what is also going to add further disappointment for Giacomo Altoe is that 3-second penalty. When he got given it, it kind of meant nothing because he was 3.5 seconds clear of Enrique Chavez. He's now only 2.3 seconds clear of the Portuguese driver. So although he runs fourth on the road, he will probably, on adjusted time, be shuffled down to 5th. Heading towards turn 11 for the penultimate time. Valentin Pierberg, ahead of Giacomo Altoe, this fight for third position. They are still within half a whisper of second place. It's Duncan Cameron is right in front of them. Through the double right-hander and into start. Is it going to quite be the final lap of the race? No, it's not. It's going to be the penultimate lap of the race now. So Andres Saravia's pace and track position able to squeeze 2 more laps out of it. Now that opens the window for Altoe, as does the fact that they are catching Luis Silva in the Sports and U Mercedes. Meanwhile, here is Andres Saravia, and Saravia in imperious control. He went very, very well at the start of his stint there. After he's just been able to manage the car's pace and do exactly what the team would have asked of him. Squeal of tyres somewhere out on track, we could hear. Don't think, though, that's coming from the car of Saravia. As he just eases the throttle. No change either in the battle for second, but it is as close as it has been. And this is why it was all lappery with Luis Silva, and this opens the door to Giacomo Altoe. This is the best opportunity that Altoe has had, but the Mercedes has got a lot of poke in a straight line, and there's nothing that the Lamborghini can do as they head into turn 11. Can Altoe pressurise Pierberg into the Sacs curve? Tries to just get alongside under braking. Can't really do it. The braking distance in these GT3 cars being so short. Through the double right-hander. 1 more lap, 4.5 kilometres with which to try and sort it out. But even if Altoe were able to make his way through, it's unlikely that he would get anything like the 3-second buffer that he needs. So Duncan Cameron and Valentin Pierberg looking very good for second and third in the race overall, and a 1-2 in the Pro-Am class. Clock has ticked to 0. So for Giacomo Altoe, he's only really got a couple more rolls of the dice. One of them, though, is heading towards the hairpin at turn 6. Now Altoe trying to tuck under the rear spoiler, as none of that is of any concern for Andres Saravia. The Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren squad, they switched to the McLaren once more over the winter. The cars were immediately on the pace in Paul Ricard. Had a disastrous day as a team on the Sunday, but what a way to bounce back with Rader and Saravia out front and well clear, looking like it's going to be victory by the best part of 15 seconds for Andres Saravia this afternoon as he heads through the Sacs curve for the final time. Winds his way on towards the double right-hander as Altoe is past Valentin Pierberg. So Giacomo Altoe has finally found a way past the SPS Automotive Mercedes, but the checker flag goes out to great Andres Saravia. He and Fran Rhoda victorious in the third round of the International GT Open season. For Teo Martin Motorsport, their first victory with the McLaren 720S. Runners-up going to be Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin. They take Pro-Am honours, and on adjusted time, Valentin Pierberg and Tom Onslow Cole will complete the podium, with Altoe slipping down to 5th position. Enrique Chavez and Martin Kodrich to be classified in 4th. Russell Ward and Indy Donche in 6th, and completing the Pro-Am rostrum. So here's a look at the move from Altoe. Brave stuff into turn 11. But it all came a little bit too late. So jubilation in the pit lane. Thumbs up from Onslow Cole. He and Valentin Pierberg onto the outright race rostrum. They have won races outright, of course, in the championship. And an afternoon to remember as well for Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin. In the AM class, Martin Conrad and Aleksandra Fraquina have just taken the checkered flag and victory in the class. So Andres Saravia and Fran Rhoda, time to celebrate in Hockenheim. As we look at the final classification then. So Rader and Saravia take victory and fastest lap along the Ray. Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin, runners-up and Pro-Am class winners. Spirit of Race Ferrari ahead of Valentin Pierberg and Tom Onslow Cole in the SPS Automotive Mercedes. Martin Kodrich and Enrique Chavez making a good day for Teo Martin Motorsport in 4th place ahead of Albert Costa and Giacomo Altoe. Outside the top 10, there was plenty of battling. Aleksandra Fraquina and Martin Conrad taking AM class honours from Antonio Coimbra and Luis Silva, and then the Get Speed performance pair rounding out the AM class. Unfortunately, we lost Alessio Rivera at Giotton Liang to that big accident early on. So in terms of the Drivers' Championship then, Costa and Altoe lead the way, but they are now just 4 points clear of Rader and Saravia. Enrique Chavez and Martin Kodrich just a point back. Cristani and Ramos, consistency is keeping them very much in the hunt, and the top 5 pairings covered by just 10 points. But still, of course, very early stages in the season. Into Parc Ferme. Door hoisted up by Fran Rader to congratulate Andres Saravia. And Saravia had to make that move on Duncan Cameron. Once he did that into turn 2, was able to just ease clear, build the buffer, and can celebrate the spoils of victory out the final turn. And across the line to take the checkered flag. Jubilation for Teo Martin Motorsport. Applause from the rest of the pit lane. And a very, very finely judged performance. And you can just see what it means, Teo Martin. So congratulations. Down in Parc Ferme. Handshakes all around. Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin, Pro-Am winners, runners-up overall. Big thumbs up. They enjoyed that. Griffin taking out the pace early on, and Duncan Cameron driving really well under pressure throughout the second half of the race. We will shortly be able to hear from our race winners. All smiles from Pierberg and Onslow Cole as well. Third overall, more points in the Pro-Am Championship as well. Hot afternoon's work for the drivers too in the cockpit.
We do a picture. Andres? Oye,
Rhoda, Andres Sarabia, first win of the year, first win with the McLaren of Theo Martin Motorsport. Fran, how was it?
Well, very good. I think this is one of the sweetest victories I've got here. After a lot of work from the team and McLaren to solve all the problems we had, finally we can show our potential. We have a great car, a great team, a lot of effort in this victory, so I'm really happy. I'm really, really happy.
Andres, last stint with some pressure. Huh?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I didn't get much driving yesterday, so it was like my 7th lap. And I had to go really fast when we did an early pit stop, so we could cut some guys in the pit stops, and it worked out perfectly. It was a really good job from Fran starting the car. I know it's very hard here because of the contacts, but the car was amazing, the team was amazing, and I'm really happy to be back in the winning part of the podium.
And the championship starts now, basically. So now, podium, enjoy the podium. Enhorabuena, chicos.
Gracias.
As the lights went out, it was Matt Griffin who got the jump on Tom Onslow Cole as the field headed towards turn 1. As Griffin swept through, the rest of the field jostled for position. It's a frantic first couple of laps, but then Jiatong Liang clattered in to Yantai Motorsport Mercedes, Alessio Rivera. That brought out a lengthy safety car, and when we got going again, there was lots of dicing throughout the field, not least between the Emil Frey Racing Lamborghinis, as Albert Costa slid to the inside of Michael Grenier. With the safety car in the first half of the race, it meant that the pit strategy has got thrown in the head a little bit, but Edward Cheever, the wheel of the Tempesta Ferrari, was flying. This was the move, though, the side of the race. Andres Saravia to the inside of Duncan Cameron at turn 2, as behind Enrique Chavez had to succumb to pressure from Giacomo Altoe, but Altoe, picking up a 3-second penalty, would eventually be classified behind the McLaren. There was also a great scrap between Norbert Seidler and Darren Turner, but eventually Seidler prevailed after a brilliantly judged manoeuvre. For Andres Rader and Fran Rader, a first victory of the season for the Theo Martin Motorsport McLaren. Jubilant team principal and the Jubilant team. Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin runners-up and Pro-Am winners. So lots of very happy drivers up on the rostrum, waiting to be announced up on to the rostrum. Handshakes and congratulations all around. Of course, the weekend only half over for the International GT Open. They have got qualifying and racing to come once more tomorrow. And we will be going racing just before 2 o'clock Central European time tomorrow, as Anton Pierberg and Tom Onslow Cole take their place on the rostrum. runners-up and Pro-Am class winners, Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin. And race winners, Teo Martin Motorsport, Andres Saravia and Fran Rhoda. It's a huge cheers from their mechanics at the foot of the podium. And Teo Martin representing the team on the podium.
Und zu Ehren der siegreichen Mannschaft entgeht nun die spanische Nationalhymne.
The Spanish national anthem to salute the winning team, Teo Martin Motorsport. As we move to the trophies. Third place to Onslow, Cole and Pierberg. Pole position, been in the top three all afternoon. Runners up, Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin. Great performances from both of them. Race winners, Saravia and Fran Rhoda. Great performance from both of them. Celebrating on the top step of the rostrum. Teo Martin receiving the winning team trophy. He celebrates and runs because the champagne flies once they've posed for the photos, which means it's almost time for us to say thank you very much for joining us in Germany this afternoon. Make sure that you're with us from about 10 to 2 Central European time tomorrow as the weekend continues here in Hockenheim with the fourth race of the International GT Open season. Until then, it's goodbye. On to the Pro-Am podium then, with in third place Russell Ward and Indy Doncher in the HTP Winwood Mercedes. Runners up, Valentin Pierberg and Tom Onslow Cole. And class winners in the Pro-Am class, Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin. And the Pro-Ams all well up in the overall classification, finishing second, third and sixth respectively. Very strong performance from Russell and Indy Donche, and they will surely be a factor in the Pro-Am class tomorrow, as will our leading pairs, Pierberg and Onslow Cole, always in the mix. Cameron and Griffin celebrating on the top step of the podium. photos to pose for, and then bubbly to spray. And again, 6 happy drivers celebrating on the Hockenheim rostrum. Matt Griffin absolutely soaking Tom Onslow Cole. And we also had a good scrap, as we will see in a moment, for the AM class honours, with early pace setters. Early pace setter Davide Rhoda and Giuseppe Cipriani falling by the wayside. And so that means that it is John Schaffner and Janine Hill in the Get Speed Mercedes who finish in 3rd in the AM class on their debut in the championship. Runners-up, Luis Silva and Antonio Coimbra, back to the sharp end of the AM class after a tough weekend in Paul Ricard, with Martin Conrad and Aleksandra Raquina again taking AM victory. So 3rd place to Janine Hill and John Schottner in the Get Speed Performance Mercedes. Runners-up in the Sporting New Mercedes, Antonio Coimbra and Luis Silva. And HTP Motorsport, Aleksandra Raquina and Martin Conrad to the top step of the AM podium. Another charging drive from Conrad in the second half of the race. And the German national anthem to salute the HTP Motorsport team, winners in the AM class in Hockenheim, with John Schaffner and Janine Hill receiving the trophy for 3rd place. Runners-up in the Sporting New Mercedes, Luis Silva and Antonio Coimbra. And class winners for HTP Motorsport, Aleksandra Raquina and Martin Conrad. So, a great afternoon of racing here in Hockenheim for the International GT Open. We will be back tomorrow. Until then, it's goodbye from Germany.